So welcome everyone. I'm Siobhan Leachman. I'm an avid Wikimedian. I edit English Wikipedia, Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons. Currently, I'm the Wikimedian in residence at Manaaki Whenua Landcare Research Group of the New Zealand Bioeconomy Science Institute.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Heidi Might, and I work as a botany curator at the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa. I also edit Wikipedia in English and a bit in Spanish, Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons, both as part of my job as well as outside of work. Now, if you do want to contact us after the webinar, our emails are on this slide. We've put a QR code that takes you to this webinar wiki page where all the information we'll be covering today is collated in one place. In the slide, we've also put links to the webinar wiki page, a link to these slides, and a link to a selection of how to edit resources listed on the webinar page. Please note, as usual, that anything underlined in this presentation is a web link for further reading or resources. Please add your questions to the Zoom chat or save them until later, and we'll address these at the end of the presentation. And next slide. This particular virtual webinar today is a final follow-up workshop that is part of our Wiki project ASBS 2025. And this is a series of Wiki outreach activities before, during, and after the 2025 Australasian Systematic Botany Conference, which just happened about a month ago in Armidale, Australia, from the 2nd to the 6th of November. We also held a pre-conference introductory workshop, an in-person all-day workshop shown here in this photo, and a conference presentation. Now you can read more about all of this project on the project page and also read our report using the links on this slide. So here's an overview for today's webinar. We're going to spend the first half of this 1-hour webinar showing slides on several additional or more advanced topics that were brought up during our recent in-person workshop. And this part of the workshop, as mentioned, will be recorded and added to YouTube and Wikimedia Commons. Again, we're going to cover 3 main Wikimedia platforms. In Wikipedia, we're going to cover how to create a new article on a species. We'll also address correcting bias. In Wikimedia Commons, we're going to cover how to upload specimen images from GBIF and how to correct misidentified species names on images stored in Commons. In Wikidata, we're going to discuss how to use several tools for linking scientists to their publications, correcting bias, adding qualifiers and references to taxon names. We're mainly going to go in this order of platforms, and we will use these text boxes, so Wikipedia, Wikimedia Commons, or Wikidata in a box on each slide, so that you can kind of keep track which platform a particular slide is about, because sometimes we go back and forth. During the second half of the webinar, we're going to turn the camera off. Sorry, we're going to stop recording. We can turn our cameras on. And so then you can feel free to ask questions, and we will hope to have a good discussion about any issues or stories you would like to share about your editing over the last few weeks.
So one of the topics that we were asked about was how to create a new Wikipedia article for a species. Now, this is the Mount Everest of editing, mainly because there's a lot that goes on in the background for getting an article actually started. Now, there are 2 links in this slide that are both excellent resources to give you advice on how to start this process. For those starting out creating new articles, you'll have to go through the official article creation and review process until you're actually confident and are just aware of the background on how to go about this process. This is mainly for your benefit so that your work doesn't actually get deleted, and it's also there to ensure the quality of English Wikipedia. After you've done sufficient edits and you're also confident in creating new articles, you won't always have to submit your article for review because you'll know how to undertake the process.
Today, we're going to focus on creating a new Wikipedia article about a species. All species currently living are presumed to be notable. So if there is not currently a Wikipedia page about a particular species, you can create it. Be a bit more careful with things like subspecies, hybrids, cultivars, morphs, and also fossils. Just make sure you check out the relevant wiki projects for guidelines, including Wiki Project Plants and Wiki Project Paleontology. Siobhan and another New Zealand Wikimedian, Mike Dickinson, about 7 years ago, created a helpful Google Doc explaining how to create stub Wikipedia articles for species. And this might be useful, although it might also be slightly out of date. So where do you go to get started creating a new Wikipedia species article? We recommend using the draft space to start, because draft space is a place where other editors are actively helping users with creating draft articles. And there are good instructions to follow on how to do this. Draft space also allows editors new to creating articles to submit their drafts for review. As we've previously explained, this review process is required if you're a new editor. It is also required where the editor has a conflict of interest with the subject matter. Once the new editor has gone through articles for creation process and gained experience in creating new articles, then you can progress to moving your article from the draft space without the support of reviewers. Another topic we were asked about in our previous workshops was, when you create a new species article, what about the info box for taxa? So the info box is a very important part of a newly created or drafted article. These info boxes, like the one shown here on the right, are generated by templates. There are hundreds of Wikipedia templates. Templates allow us to present certain information on a Wikipedia page in a standard uniform way. We've put in links to more information on these type of info box templates in the slide. We've also added a link to the variety of wiki projects that exist that deal with taxa. So wiki projects are where editors collaborate on creating or improving a particular type of article. Normally, these tree of life wiki projects will give advice on what taxonomic database should guide the taxonomic structure of an article. This advice is important to follow. That is, follow the taxonomic database that has been agreed to by the community. That shouldn't stop you discussing taxonomic debates or issues in the body of the article, but for the info box in particular, you want that template to remain consistent with what the rest of the community is doing and has agreed to. Now, there are various info box templates you can use, and we've added links to each of those that may apply to taxa. The preferred taxa info box template is called the species box. That's the third one on this slide. And that's the one we're going to detail in the next slide. But where this isn't fit for purpose, there's also a more general one called a taxo box. And there's a more specific one called the infraspecies box for varieties and subspecies, and we'll also show you that one.
Now, to add a species box template to an article that needs it, you click on the edit button for that article to start editing it. And then you place your cursor at the top of the page and then click on the insert button at the top middle page and select the actual template you want. And the way you select it, well, the way I do it is I just start typing species and then it will automatically suggest it for you. And then you click on that. Then add the appropriate information to all the fields in that template. And then you press the insert button. After you've checked what it looks like, then you can press the save button and that would have put the species box into the article.
An important part of the species box template is the portion that allows you to add conservation status of that species. And yes, it is possible to add several conservation status systems to one info box and their conservation rating. So shown in this slide are the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, conservation status of a particular taxon, as well as the New Zealand threat classification status for that same taxon. To add these in, it's a good idea to find a species that uses the conservation status system that you want to use, and then use their species box template as a guide. To do this, you go to the page, the species page you want to look at in edit mode, click on the species box of that article in edit mode, and this screen on the right will pop up as shown here. The infraspecies box template is similar to the species box template, but for subspecies and varieties. The link given in the slide gives information on this template. So I'm showing you an example here of my own work. This is an endemic species of forget-me-not, which has included such fields as conservation status, links to the botanists who describe the species originally, and some synonyms. You don't have to include all this information from the start. It can be added later by you or by others. The important thing is to get the template in there with the basic information, and importantly, hopefully also an image.
And in this slide, you can see Heidi's put a screenshot of actually the wiki text rather than the infraspecies box in visual editor mode, just to give you an indication of what it would look like in when you're editing it, not in visual editor.
Good point, Siobhan. So far, we've discussed species box and infraspecies box. Sorry, I'm just getting a little background noise, so just please everyone turn off their microphone if they can. Thank you. So far we've discussed species box and infraspecies box templates. Like I said, there's hundreds of other templates to use on pages themselves. We're highlighting here other templates that are useful for a New Zealand species, including short description template, the Use New Zealand English template, which if you're editing a New Zealand species, you'll want to use, the Use DMY dates, the block quote, if you want to add a quote from an article, and the taxon bar template, which puts that lovely box at the bottom of the page. So these are all additional templates you'll want to use on your new species article.
Now, after you've first published your new article, the talk page for that article will normally need to be created. That's if the reviewer hasn't already done this for you. Now, if the talk page is a red link next to the article tab, basically this means that talk page will have to be created. And the easiest way to create a talk page for that new article is to click on the red link and then add the wiki markup information for wiki projects, as well as the rating of the article. Now, I've added in this, you can see the wiki markup needed for an Australian plant species, as well as a New Zealand plant species. The main difference between these articles is that you'll be classifying the article and also rating the quality of that article based on the guidance given by the appropriate wiki project, that is Wiki Project New Zealand or Wiki Project Australia. Now, only rate your own article up to what you regard, or what the wiki project would regard as a C classification. So if you think it's just a stub, say stub. If you think it's a start article, say start. This is based on what the wiki project has guidance. And if you think, or you think it should be rated as a C, say C. Anything above that, you'll need other editors to come in and weigh in on the quality of the article that you've created. You can only create and edit talk pages in Wikisource, and that means in source editing mode, because Visual Editor is not able to be used on talk pages. So Wikisource looks like this, with the curly brackets to start and end each phrase, and also using pipes to add information such as the class and importance of each article. And once again, it really does help to find a similar article with a similar talk page and use that as the guide when creating a new talk page for a particular article. Now, another question that we were asked about was about correcting bias in Wikipedia. Our advice is, when editing, be bold. If you see bias, improve Wikipedia by editing that article. It's known that Wikipedia does have significant biases, and this has been studied and written about, and many editors are actually aiming to correct these biases. So bias can be implicit when a topic is simply omitted, or explicit when a certain point of view is overrepresented, which can, of course, lead to ideological, racial, gender, geographic, or other biases in articles. So when correcting these biases, remember to explain your motivations when making those edits in the edit summary before saving. And you can join wiki projects that actually concentrate on rectifying these biases. We've got added a couple of examples to the slide. So, for example, you may want to prioritize creating or improving Wikipedia articles on women or other underrepresented groups, or perhaps botanists or plants from the global south. And there's also several editing policies that can actually help inform your editing. We've added links to the slides on a guide to addressing bias. And editing from a neutral point of view policy. We've also added a link to guidance on how editors themselves should avoid bias, and also the citation needed template, which I find is a really nice template to add if I think something actually needs to be, a citation needs to be added for something that I regard to be not such a great statement. Now, similar considerations and advice apply to bias in Wikidata. We've included 2 links in the slide, one to a blog about mitigating AI bias, and also a scholarly article on bias in Wikidata, which may be of interest to you people. This in the second link, for example, it found that regarding STEM or STEM scientists or engineers in Wikidata, there's an overrepresentation of people who are white and who also come from the Northern Hemisphere, have Northern Hemisphere citizenship, whereas the rest of the world is generally underrepresented in Wikidata. Therefore, we're actually going to encourage you to edit proactively. For example, you can improve coverage of underrepresented groups of people in society in actually Wikidata, and this goes towards helping combat this bias. I myself prioritise creating and improving Wikidata items for women, as well as items for botanists from the Global South. Now, GBIF, or the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, is actually a data aggregator. We're going to move now on to Wiki Commons. They don't actually store multimedia files. So we had a question from the workshop, specifically how to upload images from GBIF into Wikimedia Commons, because GBIF has multitudes of images of species, mainly of specimens. Although sometimes you might also be able to find iNaturalist, openly licensed iNaturalist images via GBIF as well. So the files in GBIF, the image files, are actually hosted by the publishers or through third-party platforms. So if you want to upload an image from GBIF, it's really you go to GBIF to find the image link, which will hopefully send you to the right database or platform which holds the image. Check first that the image is actually openly licensed. There's absolutely no point downloading an image that's, say, non-commercial use licensed, and then you can't upload it to Commons anyway. Once you've got the image downloaded, you go to the link to access that image, and then you download it onto your computer. And then once it's there, you can then upload that image into Wikimedia Commons via either the upload wizard, and that's on the main page of Wikimedia Commons, and there's normally a blue upload key that you can click, and it takes you to the upload tool, and then you can just progress through the steps that it asks for all the information you need in order to upload that image. You click through answering those questions about the image and also where you got it. When naming the file, i.e. the title of the image, add the species name. This is what we recommend. Add the species name given in the GBIF record, the institution acronym, and identifier for the specimen given by the institution that holds it. So that means that file name is you can easily trace the image from that file name. The caption or description of the file, we recommend copying and pasting the GBIF suggested attribution if that's given. If it's not, repeat the species name, the identifier for the specimen given by the institution that holds it, and the institution identifier. Now, the source will be for the file which you're wanting to upload into Wiki Commons will be the GBIF URL, and the author of the file will be the institution that placed that file into GBIF. Now, we highly recommend adding the species name as the main subject of this work in order to ensure that the structured data on Commons that depicts statement is actually generated automatically. Also ensure that the species name is added as a category, and we'll show some screenshots of these in the next few slides.
So now, before we talk about the next topic, which is going to be renaming images and editing categories in Wikimedia Commons, which are, again, 2 more things that you asked us how to do, we first need to make sure that 2 important gadgets are installed in your Wikimedia Commons preferences. So to do this, log into Wikimedia Commons, find your preferences on the drop-down menu of that little person in the top right-hand corner, that Head and Shoulders. And then within the preferences, find that Gadgets tab shown here highlighted in purple. Search for these two gadgets and make sure the boxes in front of them are ticked. The first gadget is called Cat a Lot. And this is going to be helpful for editing Wikimedia Commons categories. And the second gadget is called Rename Link. And that's going to allow you to request that a file get renamed, or in Wikimedia Commons, which is called moved, to give it to correct a species name. Once these gadgets are selected and saved in your preferences, when you encounter an image of a species in Wikimedia Commons that has the incorrect species name and the file name, you can now correct that fairly easily. Okay, so before requesting the file to be moved, which will be done by an admin to a new, more accurate file name, you first need to edit the file information. And these are free text fields. So when you're in the Wikimedia Commons, what's the word, Joy?
Platform.
Yes, for a particular image, you go to the summary and you click edit on that summary button. You remove all the incorrect information and add the correct information in this section. And that's just free text. So you might just be changing a species name. But you can also include information about who has re-identified or corrected the identification for this particular organism in the summary. So if you're the expert, you can say, I did this and I work at this place and I'm the expert in this particular taxon. And you want to describe why you're making this edit to ensure that the file uploader, as well as other editors, are well aware of why you are making these edits. So make sure then to publish those edits of correcting the file information. In addition to the file information for the Wikimedia Commons image, you should also edit the structured data. So you can see now we're on that second tab called structured data, which is just to the right of file information. The structured data, as Siobhan mentioned, are a set of properties and statements getting pulled from Wikidata. At the very, very least, please make sure the depict statement in the structured data of the Commons image contains only the correct information. So in this case, we're re-identifying an image that was called, I believe, Myosotis, and we're now calling it Thunbergia. So we add a new depict statement with Thunbergia, click publish, and then we remove the incorrect depict statement of Myosotis by clicking this red rubbish bin next to the statement. So now that you've corrected the file information and the structured data, and once you have those two gadgets activated, which you'll only have to do once you set your preferences, they will stay that way, then you can request the file be moved to the correct file name. So on any Wikimedia Commons image page, just below the person in the upper right-hand corner, again, that Head and Shoulders in the upper right-hand corner, and to the right of the edit toolbar, you should see a tools section, which is highlighted in purple on this slide. Under tools, you go to actions, and under actions, there should now be a link to move. The move link will take you to a page where you suggest a new file name, and we're showing this here on the bottom of the slide. So on this page, you will have to give one of 6 numbered reasons for the name change that you're making to this file. If you're dealing with a misidentified organism, you will always choose reason 3, which is, quote, obvious errors. And this is mentioned in the accompanying window that will open up when you go through this move process. It explains what each of those 6 reasons are. You can add additional information about why you're renaming the file into the third field, which is free text. And again, this is highly recommended that you do this. But wait, there's more. You're not done yet. Once you've changed the information, the structured data, and the file name, you should then also take the next step to add or correct the Wiki Commons category that this image is stored under. Now, structured data is the new and better way of finding files in Commons, but categories are the older yet still helpful way of organizing and finding files in Commons. So it's important to make sure these are correct also. Categories are found at the very bottom of any Wikimedia Commons item. Now, this is where the catalog tool enables you to add or remove multiple categories at once. So press the double plus sign in the brackets next to the word category at the bottom of the page. You can then add or delete categories by clicking on the plus or minus signs. For example, here this image is currently in the misidentified plants category in Commons. Once you've identified it, you can remove it from this category by clicking the minus sign next to it. And then you can add another category for the correct genus or species name by clicking the plus button. Once you're happy with the categories removed and added, press save. If the category you have just added already exists, it will show up as a blue hyperlinked text, as is the case here with both misidentified plants and Thunbergia. Those are both categories that already exist, so they're blue.
However, if the category for your organism does not exist, it will show up as a red link. So here we've typed the species name as a category to add, and after pressing the OK, you can see it's been added, but it's a red hyperlink, which means that category needs to be created. Now, in general, if you want to fix red link categories, it's a good idea to do so, because otherwise people may very well come along and delete those categories. But this is an extra step. Remember, it's a wiki. You could have stopped at any point in all these stages. But because we're completists, we're going to explain how to actually create a new category for Wikimedia Commons. So you'll need to complete a few additional steps to actually create and improve this new category. First, you'll need to add some information about what this category represents. Now, you can do this in wiki text. So in the Commons editing window, you can see the wiki text that you're editing is on the left. And you can see here that you can also see what the category will look like in Commons once it's been published on the right. For taxa, there are templates that can be used. Remember how a few slides ago, we were actually discussing templates for use in Wikipedia talk pages? Those are the ones with the squiggly brackets. Well, it's the same for Wikimedia Commons. So in this case, there's a taxa navigation template, which can show the classification used in the Wikipedia Commons category. And also there's a Wikidata info box template also used, which will automatically pull information as well as the image from the species Wikidata item to populate that info box in the Wikimedia Commons category. Finally, the last line tells Commons that this is a category because of its square brackets around the word category, the colon, and then the genus and species is separated by a pipe. Once all this has been added, you can then publish your edits. And when in doubt, again, just look at another file that has similar, it may be in the same genus, for example, and copy what's there and just change it for the species you're dealing with. You'll notice in the screenshot, at the moment, it says no Wikidata ID is found. This is because at the moment, although you've got the Wikidata info box template there, this category is not linked to the Wikidata item for the species. So it has nothing to pull. It can't get it, there's no link for it to get the data. So what you do is you go to the species Wikidata item, and then you add two statements. The first is a Commons category statement, and the second is in relation to the multilingual sites. And again, it links the Commons category that you've just created to the Wikidata item for the species you've created it for. Once this is published, you can then go back to Wiki Commons and refresh the category page, and you'll just double check that it's all linked in, because that no longer linked to Wikidata. Wikidata can't be found, should automatically correct itself and generate a lovely Wikidata info box. So you can see here we're on a category page in Wikimedia Commons for that species, and there is one image in this category. Presumably it's the one that I just uploaded for this species. And indeed, the information from the Wikidata item is now being pulled from Wikidata and being reproduced in Wikimedia Commons, including the image, which is in Wikidata, and other information being pulled from the Wikidata item. And you can see from this exercise how important it is to basically be able to move fluently from Commons to Wikidata to ensure that any image you add to Wikimedia Commons is linked to its Wikidata item and also to the correct Commons category. But don't worry, it seems complex, but once you've done it 3 or 4 times, it becomes second nature and it's relatively easy. And you can always refer to these slides to guide your editing as well. Now, we are time limited in this presentation, so I'm actually unable to take you through the specifics of how to bulk upload images into Wikimedia Commons. But what I have done is I've linked to 2 tools that actually empower this process. And these links give detailed information on how to go about bulk uploading images to Wikimedia Commons and provide a lot of supporting documentation. And you can always reach out to us an email. I tend to do this more than Heidi, but if you're interested, please feel free to email me if you're interested in this process. Now we're going to be moving on to Wikidata tools. Basically, we had some questions after the workshop. Participants were asking for more useful Wikidata tools, and included in this slide are links to the author disambiguation tool. This tool helps you change the author name string statement on a Wikidata publication item to a link to the author Wikidata item. And the link gives much more detail, the link in the slide gives much more detail about how to actually use this tool. There's also the BHL to Wiki tool that helps editors add a publication to Wikidata via its DOI. Now, this tool checks to see if the Wikidata item already exists, and if it doesn't, it imports publication metadata from Crossref into Wikidata, allowing the editor to automatically create a Wikidata item for that publication. Now, if the article metadata is not in Crossref and is not linked to the article DOI, BHL to Wiki, that tool does not work. You need the article metadata to be in Crossref. The last tool is Quick Statements. Now, the Quick Statements tool facilitates the editing of Wikidata. It's actually one of the tools used by as a subsequent step by that BHL to Wiki tool as well. But it's used much more generally across multiple tools and for multiple reasons. Quick Statements tool facilitates, as I said, the editing of Wikidata. And the link in the slide goes to the documentation of this tool and provides much more information on it. And finally, the last link on the slide is to a list of all Wikidata tools. So you can actually browse these to check to see if any might actually improve any of your Wikidata workflows. We were also asked after the workshop for more information about appropriate properties to use when enriching plant species taxon items in Wikidata, and also for a model item. Now, we've added a figure which provides many commonly used properties on a Wikidata item, and have also provided a link to a model plant species Wikidata item. Now, this figure is actually from our recent collaborative paper that we published in the Annals of Botany entitled Wikidata for Botanists, which is open access and can actually be downloaded in the link in the slides. And I'm pretty sure Heidi will be adding it to the chat. So this is the screenshot from the model plant species taxon item that we've sort of enriched, and shows the statement for the taxon name for a species for that in that Wikidata item for that species. Now, so far, many of you have learned to add statements to Wikidata, but you can also qualify those statements with qualifiers and also add references. And you can see here in this example that the taxon name statement has qualifiers, the taxon author, the ex-taxon author, and also the year of publication of the scientific name. And these data are supported by 2 references, including the first valid description reference and also a reference to an article that did a revision. And you can see the first reference links to the article that's not yet in Wikidata, and so instead has a link to the Wikidata item for the journal, and then again has a lot of statements, including the information on the volume, pages and reference has role, explaining that it's the first valid description, as reference properties. There's also been a BHL page ID added to that reference so that it makes it easier for anyone looking at it just to do that one click, and then it will take you immediately to the actual first description of that species. The second reference is to a specific publication, which itself does actually have a Wikidata item. So the link is to the article's Wikidata item, and it's been made using the reference property stated in, and another reference property, reference has role revision. So explaining that this article is actually a revision of this, probably genus actually. Ideally, the first reference should actually have a Wikidata item for it, but we did choose this in order to show you that sometimes it's not necessary.
That actually brings us to the end of our slide deck and the first half of this webinar. So we would all like to thank you very much for attending and watching. And I'm going to stop the recording now.